May I request all participants to please come on and take their seats. And we are requesting the panelists for the next session, Digitization, Automation and Innovation in Textiles and Apparel Industry, to please come on the dais. We already have the chairperson of the session, Madam Prajakta Verma, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Textiles, with us on the dais. The moderator of the session is Mr. Navdeep Sodhi, who is a partner with Ghazi Textiles. We welcome all the other panelists. Mr. Ashwin Chandran, Vice Chairman, City and Managing Director, Percot Limited. Mr. Prabir Jana, Shahi Chair Professor, Industry 4.0 at NIFT. Mr. Hensch, who is the CEO and mentor of Joachim Hensch Consulting, Germany, will be joining virtually for the session. Mr. M. Shankar, who is the President of Textile Machinery Division of Lakshmi Machine Works Limited. And Mr. Chaitanya, who is the Head PMT Agricultural Department, Multi-Commodity Exchange of India Limited, MCX. With this, I would request, I will hand over to the chairperson of the session, Madam Prajakta Verma.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am indeed privileged to be part of this discussion on innovation and automation in the textile industry. And I look forward for a very enriching session, especially because I remember that in the academy where we studied for our post-service training in Labasna, Mussoorie, these sessions after lunch were called graveyard sessions, you know. So the reason was very obvious. But I'm sure that this topic will be of a lot of interest to all of us. And it's an opportunity given to me to moderate the session and to be part of the discussion. So I would like to set the tone for this session. Well, of course, textile and apparel industry has a very rich heritage. We all are aware that our industry has indeed evolved by going through the warp and weft of the changes that have influenced us. And these changes have made us what we are, trying to adapt to these changes, trying to go beyond the changes, and becoming more resilient in the process. So I suppose that the future lies with those who know how to innovate and automate to get on with the rising tide of change. At this juncture, I would like to say that the textile and apparel industry is going through major shifts and major changes which I would like to highlight. First of all, I think our shift is primarily even in the fiber. If you see that there's a gradual shift from the fiber of cotton to consumption of man-made fibers. If you really see even in the man-made fibers, we see that polyester is fast being, is almost 50% of the domestic consumption, which was about 2 decades back, only 18%. We know that the synthetic fibers has its own advantages, and the world is increasingly adapting to a position, to a situation where cotton might not really meet the demands of the growing consumption pattern. We also find that apart from the fiber shift, we also see the manufacturing landscape shift, and we see that the shift is more in terms of cost and competitiveness. We find that the low-cost destinations like Bangladesh and Vietnam are making a mark in this landscape, and we all know that we have to be extremely competitive to be along with this rising tide. Another major shift I see is in the consumption pattern also. Like the fashion consumption is on the rise. We see that there's a lot of, if you just have a look at the online fashion consumption, which is also a big market in itself. And this fashion consumption is led by rising innovation and technology in 3D imaging, in the CAD technologies. So the fashion industry is also driving a lot of innovation. In technology also, we have the Industry 4.0 version that you all are talking about. and how our technology excellence is going to differentiate the industry's rise. And lastly, I think the most important shift is in the environment section, where we see that sustainability is also an increasing, sustainability and awareness of sustainability is going to be a defining parameter to measure our growth. Whether our growth is sustainable or not is not going to be determined just by our bottom line, but also in the technologies we invest in to bring about resource efficiency, maximizing the environmental footprint by minimizing the resources that we use, also trying to bring in technologies which reduce the waste, also adopting technologies which help us recycle the waste and keep the value retained in the loop, which we call the circular economy. So even sustainability is going to be a major challenge and a major thought process that we all will have to internalize right from the design and manufacturing stage. So these, I think, were the 5 important changes that in my limited understanding, I have seen. And now, so all these changes are basically being geared by the increasing technology changes and the desire for innovation that is fueling the shifts. Now, given this context, I would like to begin and open the forum for a discussion on how technology, how automation is benefiting the industry, how we are adapting to this. So I leave the floor open, and who would like to begin with? Thank you.
Thank you very much, GS, for setting the tone for today's discussion. That makes my job easier. I mean, my name is Navdeep Singh Sodhi, and essentially I'll be the timekeeper, and I can assure you that I wear a Swiss watch, so this won't be a great challenge. I would like to quickly introduce my distinguished panel here, which comes from a cross-section of the industry and academia. We have Mr. Chaitanya, who is from the commodity exchange. So there's a lot of digitalization and traceability and futures transactions even in our commodity market. So he will bring some very contemporary insight into that. I have my very great friend, Mr. M. Sankar, who's the president of Lakshmi Machine Works. He does not need any introduction, and certainly, his reputation precedes him, Lakshmi has been at the forefront of innovation and digitalization in India. And as I often tell him, I have a soft corner, being a spinner myself, and therefore, any innovation in spinning leads to downstream innovation, and therefore, we would really benefit from his insights in terms of digitalization and automation that are shaping our industry. Mr. Chandra, he's also a dear friend, and he's always instrumental in taking up industry causes in spite of his busy schedule in managing his own company as the chairman of Precourt Industries. He's amidst us, so he would give a perspective really from the side of the industry, We have Professor Prabir Jana from NIFT. NIFT has been quite instrumental in bringing new technologies into the curriculum, and therefore, I will urge him to take advantage of today's opportunity conference to share some of his experiences about skilling and creating digital literacy among our future workforce. Well, I think we learned in the morning that there are 3 big trends which are really shaping our industry, which is going through a transformation. The first trend is obviously the shifting patterns in terms of sourcing. I mean, to some extent, our industry is always known as the Bedouin or the refugee industry is always moving from one place to another. So it's quite natural, that the economic trends motivate it to look for new pastures. There's nothing new. Of course, the geopolitical changes always accelerate that, which is happening. The second big trend is about circularity and sustainability, which is not an item number 20 on page number 30 of the CSR report, but it is very much a qualification to remain in the business, So it's a serious topic. The third trend on which we are going to dwell upon today is about digitalization, I mean, it is known by many things, digitalization, some call it digitization, automation, and so on, but these are all sides of different dimensions of the same coin. And when it comes to digitalization, we are looking at it from two perspectives. One is from the demand side, and the other is from the supply side. Now, the demand side automation or digitalization is led by the entry of these new animals. I mean, I use this word very respectfully, like Amazon, who were selling books in the United States about 10 years ago. Nobody knew Amazon as a purveyor of fashion, but today they are the largest fashion seller in the United States, So therefore, they are dictating how the supply chain should respond to digital business models, On the supply side, we have the need for automation. I mean, 20 years ago, the mantra was to use what was called as appropriate technology. There's nothing like appropriate technology today, because in spite of the population or the demographic dividend, there is an effort to de-skill our industry, So which means we need a new class of digitally literate workers, operators, supervisors, so their training is quite important. Automation is needed, not just to make production fast, but also to produce less rejects, use less water, and so on. So all these have converged, the supply and the demand side. I will limit my speech, but before I do that, I would like to introduce one of my great friends, Joachim Hensch, who I call as the Ayatollah of Smart Factory, or Industry 4.0. I met him first about 5 years ago in Ho Chi Minh City during a conference when he was still with Hugo Boss. He literally joins us digitally. If you are not really having any challenges, we will definitely see this personality on the screen. So Joachim Hensch brings a great amount of know-how in terms of setting up digital factories. I've been to his factory in Izmir. So I'll encourage you, whether you are going to Turkey for holiday or business, do visit Izmir. For cotton lovers, Izmir doesn't really need any encouragement to visit. So visit his factory, which he created. It has about 3,500 workers, but the amount of smart technologies and digitalization that Hugo Boss has introduced there, it's amazing, But I'm glad that he's also joined our tribe, like Mr. Agarwal and myself, the consulting field. So therefore, may his tribe increase and the consulting knowledge can be shared with many, many more in the industry, All right, let me switch straight to the president of LMW to highlight to us, the salient ways in which the textile machinery manufacturers such as his company are adopting new technologies and Industry 4.0. Mr. Sankar, please.
Very good afternoon, and good afternoon, Chairperson, and panelists, and dear audience, and industry friends. LMW has been forefront in supporting the spinning industry for the last 6 decades, and in order to augment its effort with the current challenges, especially in the last 5-6 years, the industry, spinning industry, I would, limit myself to the spinning industry, the changes, what's happening, and the stress the industry is going through in terms of the human resource paucity for the spinning side, and then better yarn realization, and footprint of the plant, and recurring costs, and increasing productivity, then reduction of the power cost, and faster return on investment. These are the major challenges the industry is confronted with in the last 5-6 years, and how we have handled this together, working with the spinning sector. So First of all, in the automation side, the organization worked and brought out right from the opening to ultimate for yarn packaging. There has been a tremendous automation done in terms of automated blocking system, then subsequently the material handling, and also the linking the roving frame with the ring spinning, and then the ring spinning with the winder. All these efforts have been done, and that's a fundamental, and all machines have been made with a smartness so that it is IoT enabled, and subsequently the quality aspect, the raw material being precise and almost constituting about 55 to 60% of the yarn manufacturing cost. There has been a tremendous effort in terms of raw material realization in the pre-spinning process, and that has helped the customer to save the precious raw material, thereby reducing their yarn manufacturing costs. And similarly, the productivity, we have been able to bring in the compact spinning system, and that has enabled the customer to enhance their productivity by about 10% in certain cases, and minimum 5% people have been able to realize it. And that's today becoming order of the day for either for cotton or man-made fiber or even the colored fiber. And then in terms of the power, there's been innovation, how to bring down the power cost by reducing the power consumption, especially on the ring spinning with various technological advancement in components, which has really made that possible. And similarly, the footprint, we've been able to, linearly expand the ring spinning and the roving frame, and we are the first one to bring out the longest roving frame in the country with 280 spindles per machine. All this has helped the user industry in terms of the benefit, and also helps in reducing the automation cost. And keeping this as a base, now today the organization spent enormous efforts in creating the research and development in order to connect these machines, which makes the decision making with the data, and that's called IoT. And today we have many instances. The customers have adopted this digitalization across the entire manufacturing process, be it for material tracing, or for automation, or for maintenance, or for quality, or for condition monitoring, and in the future, predictive maintenance. And these are the major changes now being adopted, and that ultimately helps. When earlier 50,000 spindle, which used to deploy about 300 to 350 workers to produce 50 tons of yarn per day, and today we have a shift only 50 people, and that would produce 50 tons with all this automation. And that's the biggest benefit because of the positive. We have huge population in the country, but then to work in a textile mill, it's always difficult to get. I think people in the operation know very well the kind of difficulty in getting the skilled workforce. And that's been the major changes which we've been able to bring in, and that is making the spinning sector more competitive, and that enables the entire spinning sector to add value to their customer, their end customer, thereby Indian textile industry becoming a very competitive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sankar. Let's ask our friend in the academia. So, Prof, to prepare 21st century professionals, for the future industry, how is NIFT integrating these new technologies into your curriculum? Please throw some light.
Thank you, and thank you all the delegates in the dais and everybody. Am I audible, right? Yeah, okay. I think first I will there are two terms, digitization and digitalization. So although we are using it very interchangeably, but I think because being an academician always, the habit is to correct. So I think we should use the word digitalization, because the digitization is just merely converting analog to a digital form. And digitalization is basically transforming. So basically we are actually using the information or the data for different. Then let's talk about, when we are talking about how we are creating. Now digital literacy, also a phrase which is also in the morning we talked about, according to UNESCO definition, which says that digital literacy is actually, there are 7 components. You need to access, manage, understand, integrate, and then communicate, evaluate, and create information using digital technology. Now, if you actually wanted to see all these 7 aspects of, let's say, information, how exactly our students or how exactly we are integrating this curriculum, in terms of, let's say, digital content, there are different ways we, try to incorporate in the students. Now, if we count that, how many numbers of digital applications they learn, it varies from 6 to 15 during a 4-year or 2-year course. Depends on different, let's say, courses. But we teach, one aspect is basically they learn something to do analogically or manually, and then again they learn to do the same thing digitally, so that they can appreciate. They first learn that what are the nuances of doing something in an analog way, and when they do the same thing digital way, so then they appreciate, and that's how they actually try to, let's say, popularize that in the industry. We also, there is another way, typically in the technology students, what they learn is they first learn the application, they then try to create that application also. So by that, what they learn is basically, they understand the need of the customer, and then they will understand how to customize, because in many of these cases, morning, one of the speakers says that digitalization is not about ERP, yes. So there, everything is beyond that. Now, if you say that probably NIFT is probably, I will say in some aspects, the only institute in even Southeast Asia or even in some aspects in the world, we have integrated not only digitalization, the automation and innovation aspect of it in the curriculum. Like one of our curriculum in Masters in Fashion Technology, we have specialization. One specialization is called Smart Factory, another is called Smart Garment. And the Smart Factory has all the Industry 4.0 component like AI, ML, AR, VR, IoT, automation, robotics, and even 3D printing. All this are actually inbuilt in the curriculum. There's also another specialization which is called Smart Garment, which although from the morning we are talking about high value realization garment, I'm surprised that nobody is talking about smart textiles and smart wearables. Today the market is around $25 billion globally. And many cases actually, we say that we are competing with Bangladesh. Today also that almost every session there are 2-3 times there's mention about Bangladesh. Are we really competing with Bangladesh? Or why not we are competing with Germany? Because if you say that we are supposed to be the developed country, then why compare ourselves with Bangladesh? They are not developed country. So if you are developing, so let's compare with that. So what is happening with the aging population, the smart garment is becoming very popular and very demanding in those countries, and in some, because there are HNI population is enough in our country to create demand. We have a curriculum where we have integrated smart garments, where we teach the smart wearables, e-textiles, technical textiles, then bonding and welding of joining of fabrics, this kind of technologies which are enabling our students. They might be a little futuristic, it sounds, because probably there are not many companies who are probably offering that, but that's what our role is, to create people for this futuristic industry. And when you talk about, let's say from the point of view of how exactly the industry is accepting or adopting the digitalization, I think there is a little bit of digital asymmetry, because we all know and we all complain that manufacturing industry is very, very difficult to digitalize. The problem is because of information asymmetry. What does it mean that, if we try to digitalize, if the feeling for the, let's say, shop floor people is that digitalization will expose them, then there will be a tremendous resistance. If they feel that management is doing digitalization to extract some information earlier they are probably hiding, then there will be a resistance. We need to create a win-win situation that how exactly we can give digitalization benefit to all the people in the structure. Otherwise, there will be very difficult in terms of changing. That's what I felt when during a lot of my interactions and a lot of digital cases. And last two of the innovation, if we say that, what NIFT is doing, again, thanks to Shahi Export House, morning there was a mention, which is the largest exporter in India and only $1 billion exporter. They have created a chair for doing R&D, which is pure R&D. The meaning of R&D does not mean that, we demand something in return of investment. Investment in R&D means that you let people play with it. So they have created that 2 years before, and we are doing a lot of research in that space. And we'll proudly say that now today we actually run a very interesting platform called iSmart, which actually digitalized the sewing machine operators. Sewing machine operators is 80% of the workforce in any apparel manufacturer. This iSmart platform, which is already an award-winning platform for digitalizing the sewing machine operator skills, all over in India we are running also in abroad. We're also running one more very interesting project, and which also we have commercialized, called same-day spare part, which means that 3D printing we all talk about, but we have not talked about bringing that to the consumption. That means a garment factory where they are using a lot of spare parts and a lot of attachments. These are all imported from China. Even a 15 rupees pressure foot in a sewing machine, we don't make in our country. It is all imported from China. So when it is needed, if that can be printed and given, so we are running a platform where the things are actually made digitally. So there is a digital catalog available, and the people can actually just convert the design, print it, and within half an hour they can be using it in the factory. These are two different, probably the innovative initiatives what we are doing. And there are, of course, there will be many, because I think the time constraint, I will just limit here. So that's how I think, from the academic institute, we are trying to create, trying to imbibe innovation and new things within the student to prepare them for the new age factories. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for your insight. And I think also from an HR point of view, it's quite important, because to attract young kids into our industry so that it appears to be, a modern workplace, digital tools are quite important, Let me turn to our friends, Joachim Hensch, to talk about the digital factory. And also, if you could please share some insight about how this concept could be applied to the Indian subcontinent specifically, and what would be the economic return. Joachim, if you can be on the screen, please. There's probably some challenge. In the meantime, let me turn to TVK Chaitanya to give us some perspective on the future markets and how it benefits the entire cotton textile value chain from his... I think we've just got Joachim Hensch, so before we lose him, let me go back to him. Yes, the floor is yours.
Yes.
I hope you heard my question.
No, I didn't. Actually, I could see no one. Now I can see you, but I could see no one before, and then the connection was lost. But anyway, we'll make it.
Yes, guten Tag. We spoke about the smart factory also when I met you for the first time in Vietnam, and we're really happy that, now your knowledge can spread much more widely rather than being confined to one organization. So please share your experience about this smart factory and how could this concept be applied to the Indian subcontinent, where we need to also balance between employment generation but also entering the super digital highway.
Yeah. So first up, also welcome from my side. I'm actually not in Germany right now. I'm in Italy, and I hope that everything works well. But anyway, we'll make it as best as possible, which is, by the way, what happens in nowadays digital world. Some things work and some don't. Interestingly enough is, as you just said, that I left the corporate world and now work as a mentor and consultant. I work actually with companies in all kinds of places, but not in India yet. And that's funny enough, but I had a lot of conversations about this. And I guess one thing that still is not really understood is the why of this Industry 4.0 and the why of this digital transformation. And in the introduction, it was mentioned, you mentioned about the external, say, wolves that came into our grounds, which is like Amazon, like Alibaba. By the way, the biggest and fastest growing fast fashion company nowadays, Shein from China. It's $100 billion company nowadays. These people are entering our industry because they have no legacy and they have nothing to defend, let's say. And also they are, and that's something, I'm coming to that in a second. What these companies all have in common is that they first care about the forest, then about the trees, then about the leaves. And what we very often do is when we think about the digital transformation, Industry 4.0, is we start with the leaves. Saying, okay, I have a quality problem, I buy a quality management software. I have a problem with my warehouse, so I buy a warehouse management system. I have a problem with my production flow, I'm looking for MES systems. I have a problem with my orders, I'm looking for ERP systems. So we are, our industry for the last decades, and there's nothing bad about this in principle, don't get me wrong. There's nothing bad about this. But what we have learned from the lean journey is that we are constantly improving what we know. And which means like we live in a like for decades dominated analog world. And we try to attach digital devices and solutions to this analog world. There's a famous speaker, Peter Hinson from Belgium. He said, it's not a built-in strategy, it's a bolt-on strategy. And I guess one thing that every company and every organization in the apparel industry must understand is that we must accept that we live in an unprecedented speed of change, and that we cannot look what Bangladesh is doing or what Pakistan is doing, what China is doing, or whatsoever. We must understand how the global markets change and how the speed of our consumers change. And then we can think about like, what do we need in terms of technology to actually cope with that? I'm just giving you one example because the esteemed professor from NIF talked about the future students. Last week, I attended a conference about TikTok, and it was a workshop like, how does TikTok work? And I don't know if you know much about TikTok, probably not, because this is not really what we should think about. But nowadays, the likelihood of your post to get accepted and to be widespread, to become viral, happens in the first 3 seconds. So if you have like a 20 or 40 second video that you want to post on TikTok, in the first 1 or 2 or latest 3 seconds, the viewer determines if he's going to continue to watch it or not. We have people, your kids and mine as well. They live in a time where they spend a lot of time in online games where everything happens in lightning speed, like Fortnite and whatsoever. So when you think about this speed of making decisions, of entertainment, of shopping, like impatience waiting for parcels to come, like what Amazon, Alibaba, and Shein is doing. If you think about these people then coming into our organizations and factories and then looking onto paper sheets and process manuals and PDFs and whatsoever, then you can guess how this is not matching anymore. You can get a feeling about how this is not matching anymore. So the first thing that we must accept when thinking about digital transformation, Industry 4.0 or whatsoever, is that the markets are changing. They are unbelievably faster than they were like 10 years or 20 years ago, and they are accelerating still. We are on the verge of metaverse, of combining augmented and virtual reality with real reality. So we are speeding up the market. We are speeding up our employees, speed up their habits in their private times. And our organizations are not made for this now. So when we think about this transformation, then if we have accepted this, then the next thing probably is to really make a strategy that fits to this kind of future picture. Then we think about the technology and how we make people use this and how this has an ROI, and not vice versa. That's a very fundamental difference to all the lean practitioners in the room there and all the ones who have sent thousands of technicians to Toyota and coming back and trying to understand what lean and Kaizen actually means. I mean, we will have more time in the panel discussion to talk about this. But let's say to start with, that is a fundamental difference when we think about the before transformations that we have seen in industrial first, second, and third industrial revolution, and if we look into the fourth and the fifth industrial revolution, which implements society and so our society and our ecological goals as well. I would like to stop here because otherwise we lose time for
yes,
discussion.
Thank you. We might come back to you in a few seconds, but before that, let me turn to our friend from NCX to talk about how digitalization and futures concepts are being applied to commodities marketing, especially, because India is still very much cotton oriented.
Good afternoon, madam. Good afternoon, all panelists, and good afternoon, all the participants. And first of all, I would like to thank Rajkumar sir and team for making us awareness partners for this program, wonderful program, and congratulating them for organizing such a wonderful event. So today morning, when Honorable Secretary Sir is addressing the participants, he said that the Prime Minister given a target that we need to be a developed nation. To become a developed nation or to become a developed market, we need to think like what they think. So one of the thing is that in all the developed markets like US and China, they have a wonderful evolved future market where all the value chain participants take their price risk hedging on the future markets. So I request all the members and participants to hedge their positions to mitigate their risk. That is one thing I request. And also at MCX, what we do is that we launch our future contracts for about 6 months. A farmer can take a decision in the month of May or June that he can make a sowing decision, whether to go for a cotton sowing or not, because he can see the future market in the month of June. He can see up to December what is the price. So similarly, an exporter can make a arrangement with his counterpart for the December month exports. He can fix the price now itself so that he can take the benefit of it. And Similarly, you all know what is hedging, that he can take a opposite position of what he is having a physical position, so that he can fix the price. Hedging is not a profit-making tool. It is only to mitigate the risk. That is what the concept is, that everyone knows. So we understood and we also received a lot of feedback from the industry that we need to align with the markets, and we accepted that. And recently we had a meeting with all the textile advisory groups and associations, and we welcomed them in our product advisory group. And also we are going to have a meeting with our regulator to make it our contract more relevant to the industry. So this is what I want to ensure you, that we will make it very relevant to the industry. And I request all of you, I know that the culture of hedging in Indian market has come only some 2003 onwards only. So it is still developing. So I request all the participants and value chain participants to inculcate the habit of hedging and risk, mitigate their risk. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaitanya. Let me turn to Mr. Ashwin Chandran to summarize this discussion also to some extent. And as a successful CEO, and also you wear many hats or turbans about different industry bodies. So what's your experience about Indian industry embracing digitalization, and how do you balance between the deployment of these two economic factors, capital and labor, in our developing country, where we still need to create a lot of jobs?
Thank you, Mr. Sodhi. Very good afternoon to all of you. As you're all aware, India has a prominent position in the global textile and clothing industry. But is the glass half full or is it half empty? Could our position have been better? Could our position have been stronger? For sure. But there is really no point in dwelling in the past, but we have to look at success stories and experiences around us to figure out where we need to go in the next decade. How have countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, how have they grown faster than us in the textile and clothing industry in the past couple of decades? We also need to look at our own success stories in India. Home textiles. That's the only product category where we have the highest market share in the biggest market in the world, the US. So what are the lessons that we can learn? I think it all boils down to competitiveness. I'm sure Mr. Sodhi will agree. Ghazi has done several useful studies on competitiveness and how India fares among all the other nations that are competing for global textile and clothing trade. And how do we use technology and innovation? How do we harness technology and innovation to gain a competitive advantage over our competitors? I think there are three main areas to focus on here. First, cost. Cost is a key element of competitiveness. Whether you look at productivity, whether you look at process control, whether you look at scale. Technology plays a huge part in all of these factors. If you look at productivity, machinery uptime, data analysis, speeds, labor productivity, better monitoring systems, all these are key components that dictate how competitive, how cost competitive a manufacturing process is. I'll give you a simple example. A spindle monitoring system. As all of you are aware, the ring spinning process hasn't changed for over a century. But a simple innovation like a spindle monitoring system has brought about significant changes in how an operator manages a ring frame and how productivity is monitored on the shop floor. And it has quite transformed the job that a ring frame operator does. These are the kind of innovations that are necessary across our supply chain to bring about cost competitiveness. Second, we look at service. When I say service, we look at delivery, we look at logistics, having the right product at the right time, having the right product on the shelf. All these are very, very critical factors in ensuring that you're able to service your competitor properly. And for this, today you have tremendous amount of data analytics available to us, big data as they call it, whether it's B2B data, whether it's analysis of trends, analysis of point of sale information. We need to make use of data to provide better service to our customers, and that can be done again by harnessing technology. Finally, I would look at branding and promotion. You know, our industry is a very, very fragmented and diverse industry in our country. And collaboration is very often lacking. We still look at our businesses as standalone entities, and we find it very difficult to share information and find it very difficult to collaborate with one another or to collaborate with industry organizations or to collaborate with the government to further our business interests. Again, the professor didn't want me talking about Bangladesh, but again, Bangladesh is a shining example in terms of what promotion can do for an industry. If you look at their government association, they've done brilliant work in branding the industry, in creating more outreach for their industry, and to put their name in almost every garment sourcing or every garment retailer's heads. So that is what we need to do. Our industry needs to come together, not only with each other, but with the government and with the trade bodies to brand our country's business, to brand our country's industry, and improve our reach and position in the global textile trade scenario. Here again, technology, whether it's social media, whether it's all kinds of information sharing, we need to harness the right technologies to put ourselves out there and to make ourselves heard and seen. Finally, Mr. Sodhi's point with regard to allocation of capital, how do you, balance between economic capital and human capital? You know, just as a healthy body needs a balanced diet, a healthy business needs a very, very balanced allocation of capital. Human capital and human resources are the backbone of every organization. And today, in our country, we can't look at ourselves as a cheap destination, a cheap manufacturing destination anymore. We are not. So we need to, again, harness technology and automation to ensure that our workers' jobs are made easier and to ensure that our workers are not doing things that can be replaced with technology or their jobs can be made easier with technology. So there is tremendous amount of scope in the HR and IR space with regard to usage of digitalization and usage of technology. And I think we have a long way to go. But to answer his question, yes, you need to look at the human cost as an investment, and we need to develop our workers, we need to skill our workers, develop our managers to ensure that we are not seen as a low-cost manufacturing destination anymore, and we have a long way to go in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chandran. I would appreciate if the JS could make a few concluding remarks, and then we come to the end of this session. Thank you very much.
So in spite of being a post-lunch session, it was a very interesting and healthy discussion on the role of technology and innovation, how it has led the growth so far, and what are the challenges that we will all have to face and go beyond them to be a leader in the textile and apparel sector. We all began with, of course, Mr. Shankar talking about his experience. But before that, we had the opening remarks by Mr. Navdeep Sodhi, and he rightly pointed out how our focus has to shift to emerging subjects of circularity and bring them in the mainstream. We then later on, we had after him a discussion on how automation in the spinning industry led by the president, Mr. Shankar, has brought about cost cutting in by the use of raw materials, the innovations in the costing of power, and the importance of a skilled workforce to drive this change, which he mentioned that the lack of a skilled manpower to meet these challenges. After that, we had a discussion, a session, a part of it which was also spoken about by NIFT professor on the usage of the word. In fact, he let us understand the difference between digitization and digitalization. And he talked about how NIFT, how Shahi Exports has now begun in right earnest by a chair for R&D, which I suppose is a very welcome initiative, and we can see more and more of this coming up. We were having a very good online session in which the exponent of smart factory, he explained what a smart factory actually, his experience in this, and how we all can try and adopt this process, this approach, not like from as a very good analogy that he used was about how we begin from the leaves and then we go up to the forest and we miss the woods for the trees. So that was a very, I think, a very interesting analogy which was used for us to bring home the point that we cannot be really software driven, but we need to understand what we want and then align our technology for that purpose. We had another perspective given by Mr. Chaitanya on how the role of futures markets and how the hedging culture has come, but we also need to get more deeply engaged in the recent futures market technology changes and the culture of hedging, how it has to be deepened in our country. And finally, I suppose the summary of how technology and innovation does impact cost competitiveness, impacts service delivery, the branding and promotion, and last but not the least, the allocation of economic and human capital was emphasized by the CEO of Precor, Mr. Ashwin Chandan. After a meaningful discussion on innovation and automation, I suppose it's time for us to wind up our session, because we'll be very soon listening to our Honorable Minister of Textiles, who has been providing us august leadership. And at this forum, I would like to say that I want to express my gratitude for the yeoman service that the industry has done to bring up this sector, which is the most ancient industry, providing employment next to agriculture to millions and millions of workforce, mostly in the unorganized sector, but definitely the service, the yeoman services industry has done is indeed laudable. And as a part of the government machinery, I would like to say that we would like to facilitate all those innovations and changes, positive changes that we would like to take our industry forward. With this, I think we can conclude the session, and I'll hand over it to Chandrima. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you all the panelists. Before we close the session, can I request the chairman of the session, Madam Prajakta Verma, to felicitate the moderator and our panelists. The moderator of the session, Mr. Navdeep Sodhi, partner Gurzi Textile. Thank you, sir. Mr. Ashwin Chandran, Vice Chairman, City. Mr. Prabir Jana, the Shahi Chair Professor of NIFT. Mr. M. Shankar. Yes, ma'am. Lakshmi Machine Works Limited. And Mr. T.V.K. Chaitanya from MCX. And we extend our thanks to Mr. Joan Hensch for his virtual presence.
Thank you.
Joachim, sorry. For his virtual presence. And our virtual greetings to you, sir. Thank you for your presence and your wonderful remarks.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll be shortly be having our Honorable Minister here.